So,
Okay, so now what do we do, Derek?
yes.
What do we do?
So
there's hope.
But wait, there is hope for us.
It is 12:30, and welcome everyone to the July 24th episode of Ask and Praxis. The gang is all here. We're lucky to have Todd, although lucky is maybe not the word I'd always use, but we're lucky to have him because he managed to get his Delta flight, got him home. So we're lucky to have him.
And being backed by Asks and Praxis was like, whatever it takes, if we're renting a car, buying a bicycle, whatever it takes.
As it should be. As it
Yes.
should be. All right, today's topic is what's new with Microsoft 365 Learning Pathways V5 and the Lookbook. And so today is the Derek show, as he did a bunch of these updates. I did help a little bit, so I have a little bit to talk about, but in general, this was Derek's baby. So he is going to cover this. We're going to talk about the Lookbook. We're going to give you a Lookbook update. The Lookbook has not been updated. We are going to give you an update on the Lookbook. We are going to give you then a provisioning options because of the Lookbook not being here anymore. And then we're going to talk about Learning Pathways V5 update and what that means to everyone. All right. So let's start with the Lookbook update.
All right. So we have some sad news. A month and a half ago, the Lookbook was essentially shut down as we know it. They ended up having to remove all the point and click provisioning. You used to be able to go to the Lookbook, enter in, authenticate with your Microsoft account, and then you could install different site templates in your tenant. So you could check out how things had been created. You could also spin up some sites pretty easily. That's all gone. Also, what's gone is they used to list the different web parts that they were using for the in those templates and how they had been configured. So that's gone as well. Learning Pathways has been completely removed from the Lookbook. And if you go to lookbook.microsoft.com, that is now a dead link. It has been replaced with sort of a shortened, abbreviated version of the Lookbook at the URL in here in the bottom of the slide, but it's also in our resources at the end. So the TLDR on that is that essentially all that point and click provisioning is gone, which was the more common reason or way folks were installing Learning Pathways.
Great. Definitely the easier method.
Yes. So.
Okay, so now what do we do, Derek?
Yes.
What do we do?
So
there's hope.
But wait, there is hope for us. We have two options. The Lookbook essentially provisioned, used PNP provisioning to instantiate a site template and then set everything up. You can still do that. That template exists. That PNP PowerShell command still exists. It's literally like one line of PowerShell. So you can go and you can download that. So the site template is a really great way if you want to spin up and use the exact same, setup and site that you had before with the Lookbook. It will provision all 10 languages that Learning Pathways supports. So if you don't want to use all 10 of those, either do the manual install or you need to make sure you turn all those off. It's going to go in.
Turn them off after you provision, though. So you provision it, it creates all the translated pages, and it changes all the languages in the site property. So you just go turn them off, and then you can delete the pages that are associated with those languages.
Yeah,
I just did that recently, and it took me 5 minutes. It wasn't that hard
it's not that hard, but.
It's also going to create, as Julie was just saying, it's also going to create all of those pages for you. So you do have to remove them. All right. It does leverage PNP provisioning, so you have to download the site template itself, as well as run the PNP command. Now, we have another option, and that is the manual install. This is essentially where you just take the package, you create your own site collection, you deploy the application to your app catalog, either the tenant app catalog or the site collection app catalog, whichever, and you deploy it in your organization. You create your own specific learning portal for your organization. The old site had the site template has the hero web part and a bunch of quick link web parts that sort of go to specific places that it was designed to sort of promote. If you want things your own way, the manual installation way is probably the better way for you to do that. It also only provisions the languages that you want provisioned. So if you want content in French, you need to make sure that you create content in French.
So a couple other things about that too, though, is when you're deploying, you certainly can deploy to a site collection app catalog. I think if it were me though, I would tell everyone to put it in a tenant app catalog. And then you have the option to either fully deploy it to all sites in your tenant and or not. And so that option is one that you can look at as far as like, do I want to have the web part available in every site collection in my tenant? And then when you deploy the package, you'd say, yes, deploy this for all sites. Or I want to individually in each site collection in my tenant add the it's considered an app at that point. So you would add the Learning Pathways app, which then surfaces the web part in that particular site collection. So I think that's often a decision that you'll want to make as well. And of course, as you said, you could do a site collection app catalog, but then you don't have the benefit of being able to like put the web part on other pages.
Yep. Some really good news, and I think this is one of the big challenges that folks had with the Lookbook was that it required global admin permissions because it was essentially one external web app reaching into your tenant to make changes. You don't need to be a global admin to deploy Learning Pathways. You really just need to be a SharePoint admin, and you need to be a site collection admin on the admin site, the Learning Pathways site that you want to create. So it brings the bar down for like what kind of level of involvement you need to get it installed. So before you had to, especially if you were in a lockdown organization, you would have had to go through multiple levels of hoops and justify the global admin access. And this really brings that bar down to something a lot more attainable for folks that manage SharePoint.
And it's not stated on this page, but the manual install is also done through PnP PowerShell. So you still have to you have PowerShell installed on your machine. No, you have to. It's not everyone's cup of tea. You still have to have PnP PowerShell installed so that you can run the script that's provided for you in the repo for Learning Pathways.
Yeah, Julie, I think we should have you write a CLI.
I think I'm going
install.
to just that we can vex Todd. I love the idea.
To spite me.
Yeah, yep. For spite.
Nights and weekends.
Yep. All right. Let's
move on. So what is Learning Pathways then?
Yep.
Let's give everybody.
For folks that aren't familiar with Learning Pathways, it is essentially a customizable online learning platform from Microsoft and the MVP community. Julie, it's sort of a virtual team across the two organizations. Julie and Stefan created the first version, the first through fourth version. I took over sort of managing code updates and all of that stuff. And then we all together just built a brand new update to it. It's essentially a micro learning platform. I was doing a call with a webinar last week, and someone actually gave me a great terminology: snackable learning. I love that. That's my new term now for Learning Pathways content. So snackable learning. It can also be your custom learning platform. So there's Microsoft created content, but you can also create your own custom content. And I know we talk about Learning Pathways a lot on here, but it's just such a great tool that lets you sort of bring all of that content together. It also lets you customize the content through SharePoint pages or external content, provided that external content can be brought in through an iframe.
All righty, let's move on.
So
I think, sorry,
yes.
let me just say one thing. So when we say your own custom content, that can also just be content you already have, content that's in your intranet, content that you've got stored 100%. In SharePoint. The point is, it's a way to surface your content in different ways and in other contexts.
Absolutely.
And pull it together in what we like to term as playlists. So the playlist can then mix content from various sites in your intranet, plus stuff that Microsoft provides via its Learn portal. So there's a lot of ways to then mix and match content together to sort of give an end-to-end sort of snackable learning experience just in time, right in context with wherever the user is working. And so that's like a scenario that we like to show off a lot, which is to say you have some page in your SharePoint site with some business process that, you know, gets driven by a list or something, or even SharePoint framework solution or whatever it might be. And right on the same page, you can have sort of a learning pathways web part that's filtered down to the exact piece of learning that goes with the page that it's on, be that a list or some other document library or some other, you know, customization or whatever it might be, right in that space. So they're like, hey, I got to do this expense report. And oh, look, I've never done an expense report, or I forget how to do an expense report, or there's an update to the expense report process. And the learning about that is right here on the same page. And that's the super powerful thing that it can bring you. And so, of course, as Mark, you're saying, custom content, that's anything you can surface on a SharePoint page and or will be able to be iframed. So it could be a document, it could be a stream video, it could be, you know, whatever you can put on a page, or then like any external content that that can do that. So
Absolutely.
Sorry, Derek, go ahead.
I mean, pretty much. I mean, yes, all of those things. For those of you who aren't familiar with the features, essentially it's an HTML and CSS based web app that supports that snackable learning. It does currently it does support 10 languages with all the Microsoft provided content: English, Spanish, French, Dutch.
Wow, you're going to really try to do this?
Dutch, Chinese, Brazilian Portuguese, German. Oh, so close, so close.
Falling apart.
Wait, Italian.
I was going to say you didn't say Italian.
And Japanese. Got it. Got them all. All right.
Well done.
So it supports 10 languages. And as Julie was saying, it lets you create customized content through SharePoint pages or external URLs. Julie also mentioned that distributed content model. So, you know, for instance, if you have a custom application and IT built the application and they've got some instructions on how to use it, but it relates to a policy that finance owns, you can knit all of that content together in one playlist and let the content owners be responsible for their own parts. You also can create your own custom content packs. So if you have very specific learning for your organization or very specific things that you want to include, you can either create those through the user interface, or you can create your own custom content pack to only surface your own institutional content. And as Julie's going to talk about in a couple of minutes, we've got a brand new functionality to let us add in custom analytics.
Yes, we do. And with those custom content packs, that's most useful when you have a set of content that lives maybe external to SharePoint, and you know it can be iframed. You can create sort of the JSON blobs of pointers that point and knit all of those that content together into a content pack, and then it becomes its own thing that you can sort of manage separately from the Microsoft Learning stuff, and you can pin to either any of the content packs from the web part. So that's a really powerful, cool feature.
Absolutely.
All right. What is new in V5?
So Julie, Stefan, and I spent a lot of time the last couple of months building out the new V5. Right now, it's currently in beta testing. So we're seeking folks that are willing to give it a try, kick the tires. What the changes that we made, some of them were sort of back-end changes. We upgraded the SharePoint framework version. It was on a very old version, and then we brought it up to the most recent version. We've also updated PNP.js. Again, that was on an older version that was no longer supported. We brought it up into the current tech stack. We also updated the user interface. We've made it all HTML. We've removed the Julie,
Office
what's the word?
Fabric.
Yes,
Office Fabric
the
UI.
Office Fabric UI, and made it purely HTML and CSS using H2O. We, as part of that, we made a lot of accessibility updates. The tech that was around for browser text for accessibility way back when we created this, has changed over the years and made things much easier. And so we've edited that so that it's now much more accessible for folks. And we also added in a couple of different items which over the years have been added as enhancement requests. The first is a sticky header. Some of the content playlists or the pieces of content are very long. And so now as you scroll down, the header to allow you to move back and forth between assets is now stuck to the top of the page. And also folks have really honestly asked to have the search box be visible so that you can search for assets. So that's now a property that you can set to turn things on and turn things off. And in addition, the custom analytics webhook.
Yeah, the search box thing, I just wanted to point out, a lot of people have mentioned or commented that the search box in the web part, they get their users or they get confused between the search box in the web part and the Microsoft 365 search box at the top of the screen. And they're very different things. The search box for Microsoft 365 is not something we can sort of hook into. So it's not, we can't make that search box be like scoped to just learning content, because that's not really how that search works. Without, there's a long story I could talk to you here about customizations. I'm not going to, but the only thing that will come up would be then any pages, obviously, if you do a search, any pages that are searchable in general or lists that are searchable in general come up. So any pages for learning pathways that are hosted in your tenant would come up in that search. But when we're talking about the search box in learning pathways, that's to search the JSON files that have the assets defined in them. And that's the external assets as well as your custom internal assets. So to be able to search all of that content, we had to create our own custom search box, and that's why it has its own search box. So that's something I thought I should point out. Derek, Naveen posted asking about does Microsoft Learn integrate with learning pathways? And so maybe you could talk to this a little bit. I actually don't know where this stands. I know where it was going to stand like several years ago. I have no idea where it is now.
So yes and no, I can speak to it. The short answer is I would try a page and see if it works. Some pages in Learn are able to be iframed in, and some pages are not. That is based on what I've tested myself. So there's a header that for browser security reasons doesn't allow content to be iframed. And that is set on the Learn content. So if it's set to not allow iframing, then it does not work. But you can try it yourself.
Okay, well, that's cool.
Yep.
All right, so let's move on and talk about this new webhook feature. So this is to be fair, what originally happened is when Learning Pathways first was introduced, a lot of people asked the question, is this an LMS, which is a learning management system? And we've consistently said it's not a learning management system, because that isn't really the goal. Learning management systems are so much more robust and have so much more in them as far as like setting up like who needs to train on what, and making sure to like push the learning to them and giving them reminders and tracking and all of that kind of stuff. But that doesn't mean that you don't want to have some sort of metrics around who's looking at your learning content, and just from the perspective of knowing what's popular and what's not popular, or what's getting watched and what's not getting watched. And just like you want to see the metrics on SharePoint pages that you're that your users look at. You probably also want to have some information about the learning content through the learning pathways playlist that they're looking at. So I had this idea a long time ago because it's a pretty simple, from the perspective of the learning pathway solution, it's a fairly simple thing to implement. So I had this idea a long time ago, and V5 seemed like the right way to go about it. So we have a new feature we're calling webhooks. Essentially, it fires on each view of an asset. So as a user goes to a page to an asset in a playlist. So a playlist is a set of assets, and each asset is either a SharePoint page in your site collection or an external URL, a SharePoint page in your tenant or an external URL. So every time one of those is viewed by a user, it will fire the webhook if you have it configured. And so what that does is it sends a post request, an HTTP post request, to an anonymous HTTP endpoint of your choosing. So you define what that HTTP endpoint is, and as long as it's an anonymously accessible URL, the post request will go to that endpoint. The payload of that can include who the user is, the tenant they're coming from, which is obviously your own, the web part version, the language that they're in, the event type, so that they're viewing the webhook. It'll always be the same because we only have one event type at this time. The page URL that they are on, the playlist ID that they are viewing, the playlist name that they're viewing, and which of the assets in that playlist that they're viewing. So all of that content then gets sent to that HTTP endpoint. Now, you can implement that HTTP endpoint with Power Automate. You can create, as long as you have a premium connector, you can create an anonymous HTTP endpoint, and you can then set that up as the endpoint. You can do logic apps will also do that. You could do an Azure function. You could build your own very own custom website and host it on whatever platform you choose to host it on. But as long as it'll take a post request, that is good enough. And so how do you set this up, you might ask? Well, we have added another tenant app property. So one of the principles of how Learning Pathways works is that it has, previous to version 5, 3 different tenant app properties. And so what this is, a tenant app property is a readable value that's readable by anyone who has access to the tenant, period. And they're only writable to people who are SharePoint admins in the app catalog. And so we have this new property, and essentially you'll set that tenant app property to a stringified JSON blob, and that JSON blob needs to have the URL of the place where you want those post notifications to go to. There's then a Boolean value that you optionally can set the user to either be anonymized or not anonymized. We default it to be anonymized. So if you don't set that property, the default is true. But essentially, when I said on the previous page that the user is sent in the payload, that can be the actual URL, UPN of the user. But if you, by default, what we're going to do is SHA-256 hash that user's name so that it's a unique ID. It'll always be the same for that user, so that you can sort of track, hey, this user with this long string is going to all of these different things, but you don't know who that user is. And so for privacy reasons, sometimes you want to be able to do that. That is the default setting. But if you want to know which users are looking at what, you can turn that off. And as well, just for a little bit of security, because we are talking about an anonymous endpoint, you can add a header for a key and a key property. Think of this as like if you're using an API and you want to go use like Bing Maps, you have to go, if you're using Bing Maps and you want to call the APIs for Bing Maps, you have to go and get a private key for it. And so you can have this key that you would put in the header. This just makes it a little trickier for somebody externally. If they get your URL, if they don't have the API key that they need, you can ignore those requests. So it's a way to sort of filter out noise if somebody tries to start spamming that URL because it is anonymous. So those are the updates on the new webhook feature. So we do have a few minutes. We have some resources for you. Get involved in the V5 testing. Derek, do you want to say anything more about that?
Yeah. So if folks, we would love. Oh, there's a space between it involved. Whoops.
Like that's a
we
big
would
thing.
we would love to have folks get involved in testing V5. We were originally going to cancel do testing till the end of this month, but we're going to extend it to the end of August because I'm going on vacation. But what you can do is you can go to the repo. There's instructions on how to install the beta version. We are updating it frequently as different things are identified, and we're putting out new updates. So please, if you can, go test it out for us, kick the tires, try to use it in the way that you're using it in your tenant, and report anything into the issues list. I check those issues every day. So if something comes in, I get notified, and I'm looking at all of them. So please help us out.
If you only have one tenant and you want to test it and not deploy it to your entire tenant, this is where the site collection app catalog is super, super helpful. So what I would suggest you do is create a site collection that you're calling, let's say, Learning Pathways Test. And in that, that site collection, you'll enable the site collection app catalog. You can do that with PnP PowerShell. I'm sure if you ping Todd on social media, he'll love to tell you how to do it. So you can use PnP PowerShell, the Microsoft 365 CLI. I think there's probably a SharePoint PowerShell way to do it as well. But at any rate, you spin up that app catalog in the site collection, and then you upload the SPPKG package that is for V5 into that site collection app catalog. That way, only that site collection will use the new version of the web part, and the rest of your tenant will still use the version that is deployed in the tenant app catalog. And so it's a really good way to be able to test your solution, see how it goes, make sure that it's not breaking anything in your environment before you deploy it for your entire tenant. That's just a good practice in general, but that's a good way to test something like this. You do have to add the app still. You have to add the app to that site collection if you're not doing tenant-wide deployment, but then it will pick up that it has a version of the same package in your site collection and run that one instead of the one in the tenant app catalog. So we also have a link to the SharePoint lookbook that Derek was mentioning before, and then how to apply PnP provisioning to SharePoint sites. Did you want to say anything about that link, Derek, or is it pretty self-explanatory?
Yep. Let me click on it. I need to remember which link it is. Okay, so this link goes directly to a video that shows you exactly how to deploy the Learning Pathways template. There's a video, there's instructions, the PowerShell you need to write, and then a link to the actual template that you need to download. The only asterisk that I will add to that is the version of the template that is currently in PnP in the PnP repo is version 4. So if you do want to use the PnP provisioning to install Learning Pathways, you can do that, but you would need to update if you wanted to use the V5. Once we release the V5 into the wild, then I will talk to the folks that manage that and update that template.
Okay, that's good to know. And updating the package is a simple procedure of just re-uploading the new SPPKG package over the top of the old one, and that's what upgrades it. So it's a pretty straightforward thing to do. So let's see, Glenna, this is not correct. It turned out by internal they meant from Dynamics 365 book back in SharePoint only. I don't know what that means. We'll answer that one. Oh, later. Oh, okay, from last week, Glenna. All right, sorry, my bad. All right, so I think with that, we're pretty much at the end of time. Next time, August 7th, we're going to hit updates or talk about, excuse me, not updates, talk about the Microsoft 365 SharePoint term store and metadata. So we're going to sort of start talking about managed metadata in the term store and how we think about it from the perspective of the Sympraxians and sort of our use cases and thought processes and better practices and all of those things. See us live as usual. TechCon 365 DC, Derek, myself, and Mark will be there. We still have time to use that Sympraxis DC 24 $100 off coupon if you would like. Collab Days, New England, everybody that's in the area needs to come. We are almost done. Friday is the deadline for my anonymous session reviewers to get their reviews in. And so shortly now we will be putting out the agenda and the sessions that were selected for Collab Days New England, and shortly thereafter we will open up registration for that. So be on the lookout for that. And then, of course, in December, ESPC, Mark, Derek, and Patrick will all be there. So definitely think about joining them. All right. That is all we have time for today. It was wonderful to have you all. If you have further questions, obviously you can put them in the chat. And, obviously we're happy to help you more if you have more questions on this. So definitely reach out to anyone in the Sympraxis team if you have or need more help with Microsoft Learning Pathways. We are really excited to help you if we can. All right. And with that, that is all. And everyone have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much for joining us this week on Ask Sympraxis. We love getting your questions or session ideas. You can submit by using the link in About. If you find this helpful, hit that like or subscribe button and share this content with your colleagues.